today I'm going to be talking about imposter syndrome and how for a long while I thought that, well, I didn't really belong in computing. So a quick disclaimer, this talk will obviously talk about themes around anxiety, depression, and personal identities. So if that's not comfortable with you, or if you feel uneasy, then I'm not offended if you leave at any point during my talk. I want you to be comfortable first. But going back to that title of the talk, that feeling of not belonging, it's a feeling that I know far too well. There's some days that I think that I just got lucky and I had a few good roles, played my cards just right to get where I am today. Because sometimes I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, and it's a little bit scary sometimes. But it was here where I experienced these to the max. So some of you guys probably know this, but this is the Cornwallis building at the University of Kent, and this is where I studied computer science. And I always thought I was good at computing. I was always told that I had a knack for computing, and I was always top of the class. But I questioned that when I got to university. My uni days were some of the best days, but looking at some of the other people there, I started to question if I truly belonged there, if I comparing my skills to others, and I doubted my own work. And coaxed by my anxiety and depression that I was suffering, these thoughts would frequent my mind. I was paranoid that I was going to be found out for who I was, a fake, a failure, a fraud. And it was hard. I kept asking myself, how do other people do it? If I kept going down that path, I probably wouldn't be here. I probably would have gone down a different avenue. But I'm not. I'm here today. I've got past those feelings, and I want to share with you all that if you've felt those same feelings, then you are not alone, and you don't have to feel that you are alone. While I remember those feelings, and I still do, I still remember those feelings of not belonging or feeling that I'm a fraud. I also know the friends and the people that also shared those same experiences that helped me through those times, and I helped them through those same times as well. We grew together, we overcame our imposterism together. So I just want to stress that if you felt the same, or you felt it before, or you currently are, then you're not alone, and we can get over it. So these experiences can come under a varying number of different names. So there's the imposter phenomenon, the general feeling of imposterism, but it's mostly known as the imposter syndrome, which is defined as the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts and skills. So breaking that down, it's that feeling of being a fraud, that you've conned your work colleagues, or perhaps even your loved ones, friends and families, into thinking that they feel that you are someone that you're not. That's the feeling of doubting your own work and accomplishments, that feeling like, did I really earn that promotion? Did I really earn that achievement? And based on that, will they discover that I am indeed a fraud? And that feeling of never living up to the expectations that people label upon you, being that you're seen as the smart one of the family, or the other way around is you're seen as the sporty or the social member of the family, and you can never live up to the smart. You can never overcome those smart members of the family. And also comparing yourself to others. That's say someone is doing it far better than me, so I have to do so much more to get on their level. And finally, that feeling of not belonging, that you haven't really earned your place. So these thoughts aren't as uncommon as many people think. Out of various studies that I'm going to be going over very briefly throughout my talk, about 70% of people will experience those exact feelings of imposterism at least once within their lifetime. So just let that sink in for a second, that there are so many more people that you can imagine are going through the exact same experiences as you, if you are or have done in the past. And I want to prove that with you all today. So this is where I want to get a little bit of mild audience participation, both in the room and online. So this is an entirely anonymous, here we go. It's an entirely anonymous poll. I want you to go onto here and to say, have you ever experienced those feelings of imposter before? So it's all online, all post anonymous. So I'll give you all a few minutes. Yeah. So out of 25 responses so far, 100% of you all experienced imposterism. So I need to get my speaker notes sorted as well. So now that we've shared with everyone about our true feelings about imposterism, I want to help contextualize this with you all. So I'll be covering some basic research history around how imposter syndrome was originally coined. And thanks to that research, we now know some common traits that imposters share, and also be going how we can overcome them. So going back over the research history, there's been tons and tons and tons of research. I've spent a lot of time going through a bunch of research papers for this, but it was originally coined by these two psychologists, Dr. Pauline Rose-Clance and Dr. Suzanne Eames. They both submitted the first draft for a research article about imposter syndrome back in 1978, and it was titled "The Imposter Phenomenon in High-Achieving Women, Dynamics and Therapeutic Intervention." And they investigated the impact of imposterism in both undergraduates and faculty members across a variety of different universities. In particular, they had about 150 participants, again, varying from different universities, as well as some professionals. And they all disbelieved their own competence and their work and any accomplishments that they may have made, because they doubted that they ever belonged where they were, even though that they truly all of them earned their place where they were. Be it by having high grades to be accepted to those universities, or from like their previous academic work that got them onto the faculty board. They all spent like one-on-one psychotherapy sessions with each participant, and they hypothesized that perhaps some early family dynamics could influence these imposterism traits, such as like the need to prove themselves to show that they can do it, even if they told that they can't. This also led them to believe societal pressure on women to be a factor in developing these same traits. So off the back of this study, they developed and tested a variety of techniques, which I'll be covering later on in this talk. So there were some questions around the study, mainly around like the bias. It was focused specifically on middle to upper class white women in America. And they did accept one area of a particular study that they need to sort of spend further study on after initial hypothesis. So I'm not going to read this entire block, but it basically summarizes the questions raised by other colleagues about if men experienced imposter syndrome. And they hypothesized back in 1978 that men didn't experience imposter syndrome as intense or as often as women, and often linked it to perhaps men that were in touch with their feminine qualities. But since then, there has been ample more research, multiple other focus groups, and it's been conducted that there is no specific one group that exhibits these imposterism traits. There was focus groups around different genders, race, socioeconomic background, LGBT plus identities, a whole variety of family backgrounds, and everything. So they found that all of those backgrounds had the same levels of imposter syndrome. However, they did notice that members from minority backgrounds, such as people of color, were more likely to experience imposterism. So while these studies were conducted, imposter syndrome was classified more as a phenomenon based on events and environmental stimuli, which then led for it to not be recognized as a mental disorder by the Diagnostics and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders and the International Classification of Diseases. However, during those same studies, it was noticed that those experiencing imposterism traits were more likely to be diagnosed with anxiety and depression. So out of all this research, however, there are those common imposterism traits that were identified. And if you experience imposterism, I want you to think about these traits and see if you recognize yourself in them, and I'm discussing at the end how we can break out of these traits. So the first one is the imposter cycle, which those experiencing imposterism usually follow whenever there's an achievement-related task, such as a project with a tight deadline or running a talk. So due to the high stakes of this task, the imposter would start to question if they were capable of delivering it. They would have that worry, that self-doubt, that anxiety, which then often lead the imposters down two separate paths. They would either overwork, doing as much as they can and then some to accomplish that task, or they were following some initial procrastination, saying that they probably couldn't do it. They then go in a frenzied panic to get it all done at the last minute. So upon completing the task, there is that slight period of relief for the imposter that they managed to bypass that task again and not been found out. But that doesn't last long, because after the initial positive feedback, they instantly discount that. They accredit to maybe it's the amount of effort that they put in, or perhaps they just got lucky. And because of this, it then feeds back into that perceived fraudulence, increased self-doubt, and that just perpetuates the cycle with the next achievement-related task. So next one that's linked back onto those two subjections that the imposter would follow on whenever they got the task is that the overworking. No, the other way on. Yeah, essentially it's the need to feel like they need to be the best. So these imposters were always told that they're in the top of the class, that they were told by their parents and peers that they were the smart, talented ones, and they can do anything they set their minds to. However, when it comes to a new environment, like a new workplace, or for some students, it's the new university, they encounter similar talented people and start comparing their own skills and traits with others around them. And because of that, they will start to realize that perhaps they aren't as special as they've been told. They compare themselves to the others, even if they have like a unique skill that's not comparable to someone else. They just discredit that. They just dismiss those talents, concluding that they aren't the best. They can't even become the best, and that they don't deserve to be where they are. And now this really isn't a healthy approach, and will often lead those imposters to put tasks off, like I've mentioned, even though they're more than capable of achieving them, just because they don't feel that they are capable of doing that, which is what we saw earlier in the imposter cycle. On the flip side, however, it's that superhero aspect that they need to be the very best. And it's more of the fact that they constantly have to prove that fact in as any way as possible. To achieve this, they often work much harder than their peers, often working late just to prove that they can accomplish that task far better than anyone else. And they often set ludicrously high expectations on themselves, impossible standards to uphold, and always have like this huge amount of workloads just to prove that they belong where they are. Again, that leads them to overwork. And they actually seek the validation from the work itself that they are competent, rather than that self-validation that they are capable of doing that work. And obviously that validation from the work is often driven by the fear of perhaps feeling disappointed that they haven't been able to uphold those expectations that they put on themselves. And like the last trait, this is mentally damaging for the individual, but it also hurts relationships both inside and outside of work due to that need to overwork. And that fear of failure is common and quite generic across many other imposters, regardless of what avenue they went down the imposter cycle. And this fear leads to that high level of anxiety compared to others that aren't experiencing imposter syndrome. And when confronted with an achievement-related task, like the imposter cycle I mentioned before, they fear that by making mistakes, leads them to feeling that humiliation and shame that they weren't able to accomplish it. But most importantly, fear of being found out for what they truly are, that they feel like is a fraud. And like the last trait, this often leads them to overwork, as that fear of failure drives them to continuously prove that they're not a failure. And when they've completed that task, this fear of failure influences the following ones, because they fear that if they've done the first one, they're going to get found out in the next one and the next one. So it just perpetuates that, almost like that faking it till you make it. An imposter that has that fear of failure hasn't believed that they've made it. They will just continue faking it until they're found out, which is mentally damaging. And that attitude of faking it till you make it could be why imposters commonly dismiss any praise or positive feedback that they achieve upon completing a task. Imposters have a hard time accepting like that credit or praise, specifically when it's linked directly to their own skills and talents. Now, this isn't a display of false modesty. False modesty implies that the person is being humble about their skills, but actually believe that they are capable. Imposters truly believe that they don't deserve that praise, and they often seek out external factors rather than their own abilities to support this proof. They actually seek out the evidence itself. Now, I see myself quite often in this trait. I've had trouble with this quite recently whenever I got praise for like a certain task, I often attribute it to, I've just moved pods, I've got more control here and the likes. But it's something that I'm slowly getting over. And I like to explain how we can overcome this after I reveal the last trait that imposters often exhibit. And that is the fear of guilt about their success. Not every imposter feels this, but it's mostly commented to where success is unusual among peer or family. Think of those individuals that are race of color, they come from a poor background, or those type of people, that they feel guilt that they've showed that their success leads them to be disconnected with that group, with their family or friends. And they can also fear about the negative consequences of that success, such as they feel proud about their success on a particular task, leading to be given a new task that they feel they can never do, leading to the previous task developing as such as that fear of failure. And that guilt of success then just enhances those previous traits. So another approach to this seen in other research is, again, that overwhelming fear of being different, being told all their life that they're the sporty ones or the social ones, and then achieving something that they told that they can never do. They often don't exhibit that. They don't feel proud about that success. And again, that fear is driven by the overall worry of being rejected. And yeah, so all these traits are harmful in their own ways. And if you have identified any of those traits attributed to you, I want to stress that you can overcome them. It's possible. We just need to be honest about ourselves. And we've already done that going back to that poll. So if you've voted before, and if you voted no, then, or if you were going to vote no, do you still see yourself in any of those traits that I just exhibited? For those that did vote yes, first of all, I want to thank you for being honest and sharing that, because that is the first step of overcoming these thoughts. There's a reason why I asked for that poll is, again, recognizing that you're not alone, and it's important. It was shared in that original research paper by Dr. Kant and Dr. Eames, that they had group psychotherapy sessions where they almost like role-played out those that act of conning their work colleagues, and then asked everyone else to sort of identify how that they felt conned, and none of them actually felt that they were conned. So it might sound cheesy, but sharing is caring, as it helps to contextualize our own thoughts and to realize where we can improve while also aiding others at the same time. It's essentially being one team. But I'm not just saying that because of our value, for the sake of it, but well-being is such a big part of HX, and we're here for each other. We have multiple places to share our thoughts, be it workplace or like a mindfulness page or on Slack, or even via like catch-ups in one-to-ones. We're able to support one another and able to get out of those fears of not fitting in. And we've already proved that we're not alone today. So I encourage you, if you want to explore that further on, then find someone and share those thoughts, and then you can overcome them together. Because we all push ourselves to be further each and every day, to always aim to be better. But we shouldn't aim to be like perfectionists. It's not, nobody's perfect. Nothing is expecting like you to be the perfect example of a human being. We all have our own faults. We all have our own limits, and we can only do our best, and that's what matters. So I struggled quite heavily with this when I joined HX. I was kind of paranoid that I need to learn everything about performance, everything about like Node.js, UX UI design. I had to felt that I had to prove myself to be here. It wasn't until one of the previous engineers, it might have been like Kashmir or Rahul, they reassured me one day and just said, hey, you can't know everything, and that's okay. Just focus on what you can do now and take it bit by bit. And they went on and shared similar thoughts that I was going through at the time. And I was able to contextualize those thoughts with theirs and overcome what I was going through. And that was really important to me, because I realized, again, that nobody's perfect. And this advice I gained leads me nicely onto the next tip, that mentors are important. And it doesn't have to be your coach or your line manager. It can be like anyone, like in your one-to-one conversations. And having that sort of like lifeline to help contextualize your thoughts and encourage you to think differently, while also reassuring that you do deserve that credit that you've gained, and also still push you on in a friendly and positive way. And those accomplishments, we should be celebrating, personally, not just dismissing any positive feedback that we gain, because you gain them for a reason, not because of an external source. And it doesn't have to be like any feedback that you gain, but also like milestones that you've achieved personally. And we should really be celebrating those. So for instance, everyone going out for the Christmas night tonight, that is celebrating all of the success of the speakers here, and also all of the the hard work and excellent job done that we've done this year. So regardless of how you're celebrating, doing so breaks that imposter cycle and abolishing those other traits from reoccurring in future tasks. And finally, this is important not just for beating imposterism, but for anyone experiencing mental disorders like anxiety. And that is reframing any negative thoughts that you may have with the aim of changing them to be positive or progressive thoughts. And learning to remove those cognitive dissociations is important in escaping those negative thought process. So those example of earlier on, like the feeling of I'm going to fail, I'm not going to be able to live up to the expectations of others. We should really be able to rephrase those to say, like, you know, I'm going to, for this talk, I'm going to practice and do my best with my talk to ensure everyone has a good time. I know this is hard, especially when you're experiencing those thoughts excessively, but there's this really awesome tool that Mike Holloway shared in Slack earlier this year, and it's been amazingly useful for me throughout the year, and that is Wobots. It's mainly a tool for that cognitive behavior techniques, and while it doesn't replace professional help if you have a mental disorder, it's able to enhance that, and it's there when you need to. So I urge you, if you want to find out more about it, it's free, it's a chatbot, and it's anonymous as well, so it's great. So using that tool, along with all the other previous advice and practices that I gained from looking at, you know, further about imposterism, I was able to reframe these thoughts that I shared earlier into something more positive and constructive, rather than them all being negative, like I'm a fraud, I'm going to fail. And while it doesn't eliminate these thoughts from ever coming back, I can use what I know now to push myself out of that fraudulent funk and look onwards and upwards. And if I can go back to myself as a fresher at the start of university with all that knowledge, I wouldn't be that negative voice telling him to, you know, quit or go a different route. I'll be that voice of reassurance that I know have been pushing me forwards. And I'd say that you made it this far, you've proven yourself to be here, and you're more than capable to push onwards, regardless of what you think others think of you. So I want you to stand proud, walk tall, because everyone else is going through similar experiences as you, and you can do it. So I hope you too can also walk tall and continue moving forwards, knowing that you can do it. Thank you.